Again, just recognizing that it is August, and so I want to make sure that but I did want to get through a couple of things today, so that way everybody has a chance to sort of catch up and see what's been going on. And I'm going to start. I didn't have a chance to send the institutional renewals update this week because I knew we were having a meeting, and I had also just gotten back from vacation and am still unburying myself from some emails. And so I'm going to go ahead and do just a quick update on the renewals this year. So I'm just sharing the renewals dashboard for those of you who are on video and are able to see this. And again, hi Brenda, how are you? And wanted to show you right here is the regional breakdown. So everybody's doing really well. Everybody is well over 80% renewed for their regions, which is really great. Region 4 East is still in the lead at 88% renewed, but everybody else, as I mentioned, is over 80% up. And so the NASPA staff, the Rev team, and the information management and constituent experience team have taken over finishing up those phone calls that many of you volunteered and helped us with this summer. And so we just have a couple more schools to call. We've had a couple of renewals come in, but as you can see, we are very, very close, and schools have until October 1st to renew. And we have not taken away any member benefits or access from voting delegates or the institutions that are still pending renewal, and they have until October 1st to do that. The next thing that's coming up for institutional renewals is that we will be sending, or we may have actually already sent an email to voting delegates at institutions that are still outstanding and that we are still waiting for their renewals from, just letting them know that after October 1st, if they haven't renewed by then, any individual member on their campus who has in the past taken advantage of the benefit of only paying $75 a year for their individual membership will likely renew if their membership expires after October 1st. And the institution hasn't renewed, will be renewing at the associate affiliate rate, which is $242. So we do,
Wow.
we sent a courtesy email to the voting delegates, just letting them know that we will be contacting those individuals on their campus, letting them know about the
Great.
individual rate increase. Just so that they're not taken by surprise that their staff have received this notice from us either. So hopefully that usually does garner us some additional renewals. I also recognize that it's really busy to do the renewal right around summer because it's orientation, people are on vacation, it's move-in, and then school starts. And so we certainly want to make sure that we give people time to do that. The volunteer leader renewal, so this shows institutions. So there's only about 84 individuals who are currently volunteer leaders with NASPA whose membership rates might be affected. And those are the ones whose rates are going to go up from $75 to $242 a year if their institution doesn't renew. But if any of you who are on the call today or those who are listening in, if you are concerned that any of you are at institutions or if any of your volunteer leaders are at institutions that are not planning on renewing or have not renewed, and that the increased individual membership rate might affect their ability to continue on as an individual member with NASPA and as a volunteer leader with your region or with your division or knowledge community, any of those different volunteer leader opportunities, feel free to have them reach out to myself or to Nathan, Colleen, or Danny, so we can just make sure that we explain to them like how the rates change and what that means for them if their institution doesn't renew. Are there any questions about institutional renewals? And like I said, right now, this it looks like there are 700 individual members that may see an individual member increase in their dues if their institutions don't renew. That's not a big number in the grand scheme of membership, but it's still 700 individuals who might not be able to continue on as a NASPA member if their dues increase by $167. And so we want to make sure that we give them all the opportunity to at least be aware of that so they can also plan financially if they want to continue with NASPA and they would have to pay that increased dues.
Jordana, do you have
Yeah,
that breakdown in terms of regions?
I can get that breakdown in terms of regions. Would that be helpful for the professional affiliates?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
Of course, I can send that in the notes. Give me one moment. At risk
That
drop
would be great, Jordana.
by region. Okay, I can get that to you when I send the notes out for this meeting. So that's really it in terms of institutional renewals. We're doing really, really great. We are actually trending higher than we were last year. And a large part of that is, again, your involvement in assisting with the calls, just the responses to our emails. You know, we have a new email tool that we've implemented, and I think that that has been really helpful in terms of making sure that we're getting things out in a manner that people can see and are able to digest like at a good time for them. The next thing, if there's no additional questions with institutional renewals, is I had sent out previously, and I'll get the link to everybody here in just a moment. I had mentioned that there was a benchmarking report, and actually Nathan has sent this to me in previous years and has used this membership benchmarking report when we talk about NASPA membership in general. But the benchmarking report is just something that's interesting for those of you who are just interested in seeing how member associations just nationwide are doing. And so different associations participate in this, and it's a good way for us to sort of see where NASPA is in terms of our own membership and how we're doing, and what the trends are out there, and what things people from a membership perspective are asking and thinking about. Sorry, one moment. And so feel free to read this entire report at your own time. There's a lot of different sections in here. And a lot of it, I think, is really applicable as you all start thinking about your own membership recruiting, retention, and engagement within the regions. And for those of you who are member directors on the call, how you're talking to your state directors on how they're doing this. And so let me just give me one moment here. So Nathan, did you want to, while I'm setting up this PowerPoint, say anything about the membership benchmarking report as far as your experience with it in the past?
Absolutely. So, you know, NASPA, just as you go through, you'll see trade organization versus individual organization. NASPA is a hybrid. So just for your education, so we have the trade part, so the institutions serve as the trade, but there are individual members as well. So we're kind of in that combination that I know sometimes in the past, at least, they've broken out. It is some really interesting data questions, and I think we're going through annual reviews right now in the office, and looking forward to goals for the 1920 year. And I think one of the pieces that Jordana and I have been talking with Amy around is how do we get a better sense of what really is the member value or member proposition for the organization. And I think that's where you as the membership coordinators are really key to some of this conversation. So, you know, I imagine if a member asks you or if someone asks you, well, why did you join NASPA? You know, we're each going to have very different answers, but those should be salient things that we all can name. And I know internally sometimes, I'll be honest, we struggle with, well, discounted rates at a conference, or because your grad professor told you to, or your mentor told you to, or your advisor. But those aren't really compelling reasons to get someone to come back afterwards when they move to a new institution, or if they're not presenting or going to a conference. So this document, I think, has some good foundational questions and things that you know, you should be asking your regions to come up with answers. But I would want us to come together as a group as well, answer those questions, and see is there a universal or overarching NASPA question to these. The other thing that I'll just quickly add before I'll toss it back to Jordana, many of the statistics, questions, all of those sorts of things are what we're trying to build now as well. We have a sense of what our renewal rate is for individual members, but we're not really sure how accurate it is, or we're not really sure how that breaks down for graduate students versus professionals because of the way our member database system currently captures information. So we're working on kind of clarifying and shoring up. And a lot of the work Jordana's been doing over the past year has been kind of creating that baseline. But a lot of the questions in here, you might go, well, Jordana, what is our retention rate? Or how do we compare? And the answer might be, we're finding out. But we really are, this year in particular as well, focusing on some of this baseline data around the member experience, both why members join, but then what's the renewal rate, how long does a lapsed member last for, how many conferences does an average member go to, how many KCs, kind of some of these basic questions around who our members actually are.
Thanks, Nathan. And that's a really good segue into what we're going to talk about next. And a lot of this also centers around what I've been talking to many of you about the past couple of months, is how we're going to start some of that member engagement in collaboration with you all from the regional side and with the divisions in that new member onboarding emails that we've been sort of tossing back and forth. And I'll be able to share a little bit of what that structure may look like, because I'd like to, in both in September and October, especially as many of you are getting ready and gearing up for your fall regional meetings, to start finding time to start workshopping some of the content that you'd like to see based on this. But what I'm going to do is within the membership benchmarking notes, a couple of things I want you all to start thinking about in September and in your October meetings is one of the things that came up is the support of innovation, and what does that mean? And do you feel, you can ask your volunteer leaders, your regional group, does your region, does the state or this NASPA, do we support innovation? And what does that mean? That could be new programming, that could be a new website, that could be new email tool, as Nathan mentioned, new ways to determine baseline data. It's a number of things, new events. And how is that being fostered and how is that being shared? Is your region sharing with your membership all of the new innovative things that you are all working on or doing? And how are you getting people excited about that? Or how are you soliciting feedback from your members from a regional perspective and from a state perspective about the type of innovation that they would like to start seeing? And how are you using the tools that you have available to you to start gathering that information? So some of you I've worked with on walking through the email and reporting tool, and how are you looking at ways to engage people in those spaces? And then one of the big things, and this is something that our team and we're working with our marketing communications team as well, is what do you think is the value proposition to join NASPA for those in your region? And so is it that they're joining because of an event, and that could very much be 100% true. Are they joining because, like Nathan said, somebody told them to, their grad professor told them to, their colleagues told them to? So there's a number of different things that, from a value proposition standpoint, that I'd like you all to start asking yourselves and your members, because this is all going to help lead up to helping write the content for the emails that are going to start coming out, that we've talked about as far as helping onboard new folks. And then thinking about where do most of our members come from. And this is where I'll probably work individually with all of you from a regional standpoint and maybe from a state perspective. Are most of your members renewing year to year? And we do have some ways to determine that. And is that important for you? Is that important enough for you to know? Or do you want to know that members join typically around an event? And if you already know that's probably a yes, because they want to come to a regional conference or they want to come to annual conference, is it important for you to know the percentage of people who are joining around that time, so that way you can start determining how to push out information right around that time? So if you know that most people are joining right before your regional meeting in November, say, should you be setting things up from a member engagement standpoint to really ramp up right around October? So when these people join in November, you already have some really cool things in place, or events that are planned to engage them. And then one of the things that I thought was really interesting from the report was thinking about the generational breakdown of the members. And is that important for you to know within your region and within the state? And if you don't really know, or if you want to know, can we work on finding that out? And I can sort of say yes. And is it important? Like, is it important for you to know how many people in your region are Gen Z? And what does that mean in terms of the kind of programming that you're putting on at your events, or the types of emails that you're sending out? Or do you have a lot of baby boomers? And again, what does that mean in terms of engagement and how you're talking to your members? One of the things that so I took a couple of screenshots and sort of highlighted things that I think are really true or ring true to NASPA now. And one of the things that I think is really important for you all to know from a regional perspective is this question of which recruitment marketing channels get your organization the most new members. The Rev team in the last, how long have we been a team, Nathan? 12 months, 18 months?
18 months.
18 months. Well, over the last 18 months, the Rev team has really made a concerted effort to be present at a lot of events where we talk not just about NASPA in general, but, you know, we talk about the importance of the regions, our knowledge communities, our NASPA initiatives. So we really want to give people a sort of a whole NASPA picture. And so we're doing this thing right here where it says cross-sell to non-members who buy your products or attend your conferences. We are already doing that from a big NASPA HQ perspective, but how can you do that from a regional perspective? Like, are there different events that you are attending within your region that are not necessarily NASPA events, where you have the opportunity to talk about NASPA and to engage others in NASPA? You know, are there chapter events that are happening from a different association in your region? Are there opportunities to talk about different things that NASPA is doing at a drive-in conference, or different meetups or webinars or web meetings that you're doing? But I think it's still really telling that word of mouth recommendations still consistently is the biggest draw for how people learn about it. And I think that's still very true for NASPA as well. I think while NASPA is, you know, globally recognized as an organization, I think from an individual, regional, and campus and institutional perspective, people are learning about the importance of NASPA through word of mouth. And so for those of you who are in a position of being a volunteer leader within your region, you know, how are you preparing your regional volunteer leaders to be sort of your word of mouth ambassadors about NASPA? You know, what's everyone's, you know, 1-minute elevator speech if they run into a colleague who could really benefit from learning about our Center for First Generation Student Success? Or we're right now recruiting for the 4th cohort for our culture of respect. And, you know, how can you insert some of those things into the conversations that you're having, you know, within your region, within your state, within your school and your campus? There's lots of different things that you all could be doing in order to really engage and recruit and retain your members on campus and within your spaces. The top reasons that people join an organization on networking with others in the field, I think a lot of that's consistently been almost like 1 or 2, like year to year with these benchmarking reports. And I think that that is still very important to our members. But I actually copied this part where the part of supporting advocacy, because I think the advocacy part of NASPA and the advocacy arm and policy arm has become really increasingly important. We are hosting our 2nd Hill Days, which I think has already had multiple people. We've had a wait list for it. The reality of what we're dealing with right now as a country, people are just more politically aware, and they want to be politically involved, and they want to be advocates for their institutions, for their causes, for things that matter to them in terms of things that are happening in the higher ed space. And so you know, these are still really big things. And so how can your region leverage these top reasons, or, you know, these top 4 reasons that I've listed? You know, how can you leverage networking with others, learning best practices, accessing specialized or current information, and supporting advocacy within your regions, knowing that those are major reasons that people join, and probably very much major reasons why people stay. So this is what I thought. So what I did in this slide is I highlighted what I have, and again, I don't have necessarily the data to back this up but from an anecdotal and just experience perspective, what I've experienced in my time here at NASPA as like the reasons that people do not renew their membership. I think the biggest thing, which is lower on here, but I think for a lot of our members, is that people just forget. You know, things get very busy. We're in an industry where every day is very different for someone's schedule. It's not like a routine day where like you do the same thing every day. For many of you in the roles that you play on campus, your day to day is going to look very different. You know, next week, tomorrow, you know, something's going to happen on campus that's going to change the way that your day is going to go. And so something like remembering to renew your membership may not always be on the forefront of someone's mind. So how can you continue to remind your members to renew, knowing that NASPA is already sending them those, as I've mentioned in many calls, transactional reminders at 90 days out, 60 days out, 30 days out. We tell them, guess what, your membership is going to lapse, your membership's going to expire, your membership's going to expire. What are other ways that you could be doing that? So thinking about the content of your emails and finding ways to remind people about the value of NASPA and to remember to renew their membership. I don't know how many of you have experienced this with a lot of your colleagues, but I've seen a number of former colleagues of mine leave the profession and leave the field and leave the industry. And I think that that's had a big effect on some of membership for sure. And so in terms of that, how do we see, and Jen just noted in the chat about seeing a lot of that in Region 1, how can you keep people interested in staying in this industry? Like, what role can you play as regional volunteer leaders to keep people interested in the field, to know that they are having a positive impact on the work and these students, knowing that burnout is really high in higher ed, and especially within student affairs, we carry a lot of emotional loads of our students and our colleagues and our friends, and that can really be a tough space for our professionals. And so I think that that has been a really big issue within higher ed in general. And then, you know, I put lack of engagement with the organization. And I say lack of engagement in that engagement comes in many ways. And that could just be that somebody bought a membership because they wanted that discount, but then they never heard from us again, or we didn't reach out to them. And so, you know, as I mentioned, leading into the next part of this meeting is where I'm talking about how we're going to try to fill some of those engagement gaps with these like welcome emails that are going to hopefully supplement their engagement with us. Jen, I don't know how folks want to be engaged. We don't necessarily have that specific data, but I think one of the things that we're hoping to do with some of this this membership drip campaign, this email campaign that we're hoping to launch in the next few months, is to be able to actually gather that information. And so for us, this campaign that I'm going to talk about next, where we are collaborating with you all in order to make sure that we're getting people the information that they want and that they need, that this will also give us some behavioral answers as well. And we'll be doing that in the terms of like micro surveys throughout, you know, someone's membership in that.
Jornetta, can I just kick in on that and just
Sure.
I think whatever we can collect will really be helpful. You know, one of the things I'm hearing from folks right now, you know, there's some sort of condemnation of our use of email. You know, when I ask about engagement, I think, how could one not be when we communicate what feels very regularly to me, to our membership, right?
Yes.
But you know, it seems to me that some of the feedback I'm hearing is that folks are looking for other forms of outreach. But when I ask them what that looks like, I'm not getting great feedback.
Right.
They don't want us mailing things, right? Because they stay away from the paper. You know, when we talk about social media platforms, everyone's got a different idea of what platform we should be using. You know, and if they're telling us that they're not regularly opening up those emails, then I'm sort of in this stuck place. What is the best way? And I think any one of the regions would want to jump on board with whatever the new sexy thing is to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Jen, part of that is that people, I think instead of we need to figure out a different way to ask them about that, right? And maybe this is the group that helps determine what that is. Instead of saying, how would you like to be engaged? Like, how can we flip that question? Because I think people, again, like you mentioned, like social media means a lot of different things to people. I think engagement and like networking means a lot of different things as well. So how can we reframe the question, still get the answers that we need, but have people sort of approach it a different way? And I don't know what that answer is.
If I could just offer for folks in the other regions, one of the things that we did spearhead this year with our New Professionals Mentoring Institute, they added these virtual sessions, which allowed another way to engage with those professionals in the cohort. And we get some really great feedback. So when I'm thinking engagement, I'm also, sort of thinking broadly across some of those institutes and things that we do, and how are we using some of the technology? Because, leaving your campus for 4 full days has become a little bit more daunting for folks. And we're worried that we might see an impact to the number of folks who are taking advantage of those. But, does that mean that we look at a 2 or 3 day commitment instead, but more of those sort of virtual short bites that might keep people connected to one another and serve the same purpose? So, just offer that as something to take back to those who organize them in your areas. Because I think that's something new that we've tried that we get some pretty good feedback.
Jen, that's good to hear, because I think Alyssa, it reminds me of the candid conversation stuff that 4West has played around with the past couple of years, and it's pretty low lift, to be honest with you. Like, obviously there's work that's attached with it, but I know probably 5 or 6 years ago, NASPA did like summer intern check-ins, and it was mostly with our NUF fellows, but we did one year, I think, try with our grad students, and it was just like 3 times we had an open meeting that people could pop in and just chat and offer feedback, and they did go fairly well. So I think that concept of how we're using our virtual spaces, Jen, is an interesting thought. The other piece that Jordana, as I think around like what you're offering, and it was back on the how people joined as a member, I think, or how they found out as a member. I appreciate the work that we are doing at the face-to-face events, but if the feedback is saying people are joining because of word of mouth, should we, or how do we help empower y'all as localized volunteers to be doing that word of mouth recruitment in a better way? So would it be beneficial for us to hand you, here's a packet of recruitment materials, and again, I acknowledge the paper part that we don't want to mail them, but should we have like, here's a nice pretty postcard that you can give to someone and say, join as a member. And there's still that word to word or face-to-face interaction. And is that a better approach? And then the third thing I'll just quickly offer, and Peggy, thank you for your comments in the chat about the first year serve cohort. We're actually starting to implement some of those ideas now within Rev. So I think this idea of these micro engagements, or frankly, better documenting what engagement is even out there. Jen, I think that's one of the, to your comment around, people don't know when you ask. I think what we've been trying to do, and finally I think we have some or I have some bandwidth now to start it, is really just documenting like what exists out there. What is the timeline for, when do regional directors do calls for conference committee chairs, or when does a conference committee call usually happen, or when does these other things occur? We are internally, at least, we've asked all the NASPA staff to post all of their volunteer opportunities right now. And we're going to do a call, but I know I haven't reached out to the regional director-elects yet to let people know that. So we're trying to build some of these structures so that there is some more information out there, because I think lack of engagement, we're probably not doing the right things. I agree with Jordana, we have to ask why, but I would surmise part of the reason there's a lack of engagement is because NASPA is the generalist organization. There's just too much that people just get overwhelmed. So then they don't know where they can take that first bite and get involved. So then they just don't get involved at all. And, we're trying to help better document pathways for people to get more involved.
And what I'll add to that as well is, at these in-person events, so I'll just use the example of the Student Success in Higher Ed conference that I was part of this past June, is as I was meeting with people, I was asking them, how did they hear about NASPA? So I was asking those questions, or I'm like, well, what is it that you do on campus? And making notes on their business cards or whatever they were giving me. So if somebody was like, oh, well, I actually work with mental health, or I work in this. And when I got back, I specifically reached out to those people. So, one person was working with mental health services on their campus, and I emailed them and said, like, dear so-and-so, did you know that we have a strategies conference in January that is based solely around, health and wellness? And, there's an entire portion of it that's for mental health advocates on their campus and those working with students in that capacity. And like Nathan said, trying to help those people find that in with NASPA by like basically curating NASPA for them, like kind of like a personal shopper. Like I basically made myself like a personal NASPA shopper. So if Jen, if you came to me and said, like, I am interested in these 3 things, I would then come back to you with like a list of things that NASPA does that match those 3 things. And obviously I can't do that for every NASPA member, but I think that approach has also been really helpful, because then people are really grateful that they don't have to like sift through an entire NASPA website, which like Nathan said can be really overwhelming, and that can also help them get that jump start. And so a lot of people were like, oh, I just moved to this area. I'm like, oh, well, are you aware that we have regional leadership, and did you know that we have regions within NASPA, and let me connect you with this person? And so I think that can also be a helpful tactic as people are thinking of ways of engaging members, is trying to sort of find ways to curate NASPA on their behalf. But yes, I do think that we need to figure out a way to ask that engage, like, how do you want to engage with us question, for sure. We've been doing a lot of lapsed member contact right now from a divisional standpoint. So just to let all of you know, so you're aware, I've been working with the small colleges and university division as well as the community colleges division, and we've identified institutions that had lapsed over the last 3 years, and we've asked volunteer leaders within those divisions to reach out to those different groups. Small colleges and universities make up almost, if not over 50% of our institutional members, and obviously we want to continue to grow our membership with the community colleges and engagement with staff and thought leaders in that space. And so we've been doing a lapsed member campaign there. I also recently spoke with Laura Nedson in Minnesota and talked about doing a lapsed member campaign by professional level within her state. And so, but as you can see, most people respond to email and phone, because those are really just the best channels to do that. But I did note right here that, people tend to poo-poo phone calls because they feel like people are not going to be as responsive, but I do think that phone calls can still be really effective. I know that they've been really effective for me as I've been making calls this week. And so as you all think about all the different ways to reach out to your members, I wouldn't discount the phone call as part of it as well. I don't know how many of you are doing calls to your members or have employed that as a tactic to consider reaching out to them to maybe get some of this information, or to survey them on how they want to continue to engage with NASPA, or ways that they haven't been able to. But that might be an interesting thing. It was really interesting to see that social media, as far as generating like lapsed re-involvement, was not very high across the board. And I think to Jen's point, I think people just use social media in very different ways and manners that I don't think that it's really feasible, especially for us, to capture all of the social media behaviors and needs that people have. And so I think social media is a great way to put out like announcements about what's happening and ways to inform people about what's going on within your region. But I wouldn't necessarily consider using social media as your first approach in terms of sort of getting people to reinstate their membership. But you could use it as a way maybe to say, did you know that like everyone's NASPA membership, you can use it as an educational tool and be like, did you know that everyone's NASPA membership expires at the end of each month? Have you looked to see when your membership expires? And you could just kind of give them some, you can use social media in a way to educate them in that way. Internal challenges. I thought this was really interesting. And again, I highlighted some things that I think are maybe very true for NASPA HQ. And Nathan and Colleen can either dispute me or agree with me that these are maybe accurate, or maybe I missed a few things. But I do think that from a larger perspective, we sometimes have difficulty communicating the value of NASPA consistently. I think we know how to communicate different parts of NASPA and how valuable those individual parts are, but NASPA as a whole can sometimes, because of its size and because of its generalist nature, can sometimes be hard to communicate in like that 30-second elevator speech. And so, Nathan, sorry.
Yeah, there. Finished it on, and then
Oh, no, so I was just going to say, like that is a challenge that I know that I internally find for myself personally, and that some of you may also be experiencing.
Yeah, and some of y'all have seen in the presentation I've done before, the like golden triangle or the Triforce of membership benefits, of features, benefits, and value. And I think NASPA does a really good job of talking about the features. So like, we do this thing, we have this conference. We do a better job, though not great, but a better job of talking about our benefits. So like, you'll gain professional experience, or you'll meet a cohort of 10, 15 people. What I don't think we do a really good job of, and as Jordana just noted, is the value piece. So how does the prospective member see the feature and benefit? How does it actually impact them? It helps their job, or it helps them move forward. And as we've talked about, I think this is one of the areas that we definitely would love to workshop with y'all, and encourage you to go back to your regional directors and your regional advisory boards to talk about that. So we do a great summer symposium, and we know that we bring these people together, but really, what do people get out of it? Why do people keep coming back? And it's that why part, or that value part, that I think NASPA does. Big NASPA, and I would agree with you, Jordana. But I think I've seen our constituents also suffer with that value, or that why piece of the membership.
Yeah. Another couple ones that I've added, and I'm just kind of going down this just for time purposes, and we can certainly talk about this more in future meetings if you all would like, but I think difficulty attracting and maintaining our younger members. I often hear, I work directly with our graduate associate program, and I often hear from them that they both feel supported in some ways, but also ignored in many ways. And I think it's hard for us to determine the best way to maintain our younger members and help them continue up through the profession. And I think that is a NASPA-wide thing, not just from a big NASPA perspective, but even regionally in terms of people are moving in and out of regions for jobs and trying to find mentors and support and hearing about their needs. And how do we give them that space? We have the new professionals and graduate students, Casey, but is there something else that could be happening from a regional perspective or from a state perspective? Or what are other ways that we can maintain younger members and make sure that we're supporting them while also supporting obviously every other professional level out there? And I don't think younger members necessarily also means grad students, but some of our mid-levels are not, they've only been in the profession for, some time. And so how do we make sure that we understand the needs of like Gen Z, while apparently, according to the membership benchmark report, I am a millennial based on like when I was, and how I look at things might be very different. And how can we continue to understand sort of that multi-generational need and the multi-generational structure of NASPA to make sure that we're maintaining and attracting younger members. Membership is too diverse, difficulty meeting needs of different segments. I think that's pretty universal across the board. And so again, I think it's just a matter of trying to, pick a couple of things that are working for your region. So you can't make everybody happy, but there's probably a way to determine like what the biggest needs are for those constituents that you are all supporting, and how to make sure that some, if not all of those needs are met in some capacity. And then lack of strategy or plan. And right now, as Nathan said, we are working towards developing better strategies and tactics for us to work together. The creation of the Rev team itself was a great strategy in terms of being able to be better supportive of the needs of our volunteer leaders, of our students, of our members. So there's a couple of things, in this report, but those were a couple that I highlighted as ones that I think that Big NASPA sometimes struggles with from an internal perspective, but I think might also be a challenge that you all are facing regionally or even statewide. And so, as far as the lack of strategy, one of the things that I'm really trying to do with this new email campaign is that is a strategy that is cohesive and it's consistent, and that if all of us win the lottery tomorrow, if that is in place, it can still continue on, and hopefully still be successful. So putting these strategies into place now, so that way they can be universal, they can be interchangeable, they can be evergreen, they can move as you all move into different leadership positions within NASPA, and your terms change and end at different points. So we are working towards creating better strategies and better plans moving forward. And this group, for example, I think is one of those things that has been working really well in terms of being able to share this information out more consistently with a larger group of people. External challenges, I highlighted the perception of the association and or its culture as one of those. The old boys network, not specialized enough, it's a generalist organization. Again, I think we can continue to change that perception through a variety of different ways. And it's just a matter of finding what works best for your region and what NASPA and the Rev team can do to support that. And then competitive associations and sources of information. Because the internet and Facebook is just so prevalent in everyone's lives, people feel that they can get these resources and get these different strategies and plans and information really anywhere. They don't have to log into NASPA anymore to get this information. Everything is out there. There are multiple channels for that. So I think instead of trying to compete with these associations or compete with these sources of information, how do we continue to share that NASPA is the leading space for these sources of information? That, yes, you can get it from Vice, you can get it from Politico, you can get it from the Washington Post, you can get it from Inside Higher Ed, but how can we continue to share and show that NASPA is the leading space for that source, even if it's not the only space for that source? And, there's a variety of different ways to do that as well. And, a lot of times it comes down to language and how you put that out there. But I think that those are some challenges as well. So that was just a couple of tidbits that I wanted to pull out from the membership benchmarking report. I do recommend that for those of you who have the time to skim through it, to look through it and see if you can find ways to implement some new ideas within your regions, especially when it comes to membership. And as always, that's certainly something that we here at NASPA want to support you with. So if there is information that you need, or if there is something that you want that you think would be really helpful, I think that it would be great for us to hear about that. So hopefully you'll all have a chance to kind of skim through this report and see if there are ways that we can continue to support you throughout the fall and the spring in terms of how you're engaging, recruiting, and maintaining your members. So just really quickly, I know we only have about 15 minutes left. I wanted to sort of give you a sample of what this new DRIP welcome onboarding campaign is going to look like. And DRIP, I don't really like that word, but that's sort of the industry standard that they've been using. But basically, you have one starting point and everything just sort of falls down and sort of like goes. It's kind of like Plinko, but like with multiple little things, right? So the big trigger for this campaign is that somebody is going to purchase a membership. And right now, as I mentioned to all of you, we are sending one welcome email just to people who are new members. We are not even touching these people down here. I like Plinko too, Peggy. But right now we're doing that. And then 90 days before their membership expires, we start asking them to give us their money. And so there's really no welcoming, onboarding, sort of engaging email that goes out. And then all of you are communicating with new members or returning members or expiring members in different ways as well. So they're either getting too many of the same message, potentially conflicting messages, or we are essentially double dipping into all of this, right? We're giving them the same information over and over again, and it's just not productive to do it in that way. And then on top of that, they're also getting constant reminders, notices, emails about other things that are happening in NASPA. But for many of us who really value sort of customer service and have had really great customer service experiences, I think that onboarding experience, especially if you work in orientation. You might be very familiar with this. Like those initial couple of days, weeks, months when you first join something can be really crucial to like how you build your affinity with the organization. So based on what kind of membership purchase that somebody makes, so somebody's going to go into NASPA and they're going to purchase a membership, we have divided into these 3 buckets. We have a perceived new member, and this is by their original join date. And then they are they're a renewing member, so somebody who renews their membership within 60 days of their old one expiring, or they are a rejoining member, so somebody who has let their membership expired for 60 or more days and then they buy a membership afterwards. And we want to talk to these people at the same time, but we have to use different voices to talk to them. So we want to say, hey, welcome to NASPA. We want to say, hey, thanks for sticking around and sticking with us. And we want to tell this person, hey, thanks for coming back. And so what I'm going to need from the regions and membership coordinators and even your state directors is as we build this campaign and we build all these different types of emails, is your input and your help building that, what those emails are actually going to look like. And so I'll be prompting many of you and all of you in the next couple of weeks to start helping craft some of those emails. And it's going to be a big task because you're going to have to write for 3 different people. So imagine these people as personas, right? So there are 3 different types of people, and we have to talk to them at different points in their membership. And so that can be really difficult. And we want to solicit your voices because we don't want to speak for you as the regions. We want to make sure that we are consistent in what we're saying, but we also want to make sure that your regional voice is heard throughout this entire process. So within 24 hours, so let me just walk through sort of the first 4 months of this person. So within 24 hours, these 3 people buy a membership, and they're going to get sent something in real time or within 24 hours. And this is their welcome email. This is the very first email they're going to get after they make that purchase. We want to use that content to efficiently onboard them. So we want to create some type of content that gives them helpful tips or tricks or content that educates them about something about NASPA. So if they're brand new to NASPA, we need to educate them about a lot of things. If they are just renewing, we want to educate them about things that maybe happened within the last 30 days. And if they are rejoining after being gone for some time, we want to educate them about things that NASPA has done during the time that they've been gone. So that's what some of that content's going to be part of. And then we want to include some type of compelling offer. And it doesn't have to be like a tangible physical cash prize or whatever, but it could be, you know, most people will open that initial email, so it could be a relevant promotion. So we could say, you know, hey, if they're in region 3, you know, if you register, you know, we have our conference coming up and you have, you know, and we have the capabilities now to determine some of those things. So we want to include a compelling offer. So is that first email going to include a compelling offer for them regionally? Is it going to be something that's like largely NASPA based, or, you know, if it's right around annual conference or right around call for programs. So we want to give them a compelling offer, but that initial welcome email isn't going to necessarily ask them to do anything. The only thing we want them to do is open that email, right? And we're gonna bank on the fact that it's their first email from us, that it's going to yield a big open rate. So within a week after that first email, we are going to send them another email, but it's all going to be based on how they behaved that first time when they first got that email from us in 24 hours. So if they did not open the email, we're going to send them another email with either a more compelling subject line to actually get them to read the email in the series. We're probably going to change the content a little bit. If they open and clicked on a link in that first email, we're going to send them an email that complements what they clicked on. So if they clicked on something about the regions, the second email that they get should educate them more about regional structure, regional history, something about the regions, but this is still coming from Big NASPA, right? Like we haven't even gotten to your very specific regional directors or your regional voices. But we want to bank on the fact that like they still remembered what they clicked on. They clicked on that link presumably because they were interested in something from the regions. So we want to kind of continue on with that. So this is just an example of what that second email is going to look like. And if they open the email, but they didn't click on anything, we send them yet another email that's probably going to be still fairly generic, but we're going to change some things to try to compel them to actually take an action within that email. So we want them in that second email to actually click on something. And so we'll make sure that the content provides them sort of that pathway to do so. A month after they get the first, so everything is happening sort of, 24 hours, 1 week, 1 month later. If they haven't opened any emails from us, I think the next step is going to be trying to connect with them in another way. And I don't know bandwidth-wise how many people this actually means, because we have people joining at all times. So let's say 600 people didn't open any emails from NASPA since they joined. I'm not going to call 600 people, nor am I going to ask anybody to call 600 people, but we need to find a different way to connect with them, right? Clearly, email is not a good way to do it because it's getting lost somehow. So we're going to have to figure out, and this is all going to be a learning sort of agile process, because we're using this onboarding campaign to really understand people's behaviors. So, and then if they did open either the first, second, or both emails, the next email that we want to send them will be from the regional director. And the reason that we do that is because we want to make sure that they are connected to Big NASPA and they understand what Big NASPA is doing. But we also recognize the fact that people are very connected to their regions and find real value in that. And so, Jen, your email will come if the member who joins opened the first 2 emails in that series. And Peggy, you might get an email from me that says, hey, Peggy, here are 20 people who joined in the last whatever that haven't opened any emails from us, even though they bought a membership. Can you do something with them? Whether that's you email them directly, you find them on LinkedIn, you send them a message, you call them, whatever. So those might be some tactics that are going to happen a month after somebody joins. Now, 3 months after they join, we want to do something where we sort of send a feeler email out. And this email is all it's going to have is like a little micro survey inside of it. And it's going to say, hey, how have you enjoyed your NASPA member over the last few months? And some potential answers could be, I've connected with NASPA already. I've connected with my region. I've joined at least a KC. Or it could be, I have not connected with NASPA at all. I have not, I only joined to receive a discount to an event. And this is going to start giving us some of that behavioral answers, right? And that's going to be really important because we're going to know who this person is. We're going to know what region they're at. We're going to know what institution they're at. And this is going to help all of you tremendously to really understand things and to start connecting with them at that micro engagement level. So if somebody says, I've already connected with NASPA in region 1, I'm going to connect with Jen and say like, hey, this person says that they've already connected with you. Have you heard of them? Do you know them? And that can help you like foster some of those conversations and some of that engagement. And then 4 months later, we're going to take how they answered those questions in that micro survey and email them based on that. So if people who said they've connected with the region or a KC or a division, we want to continue going on with that because clearly that's what they're interested in with NASPA at this time, right? It's a region, division, or a KC. So we're going to send them emails that are going to contain information about that. If people are like, oh, I want to connect because I want to volunteer, then we're going to connect them with whoever is getting volunteer opportunities out. And so we can really tailor some of these emails based on a lot of things on their profile. So this is sort of where we're at in terms of developing this like email campaign. It's not totally fleshed out, but we are going to be able to actually start putting this together and putting it into place because we can always add emails, but it's sometimes hard to take those emails away. So what we're going to do is we're going to really start building out the first sort of part of this email campaign. And it's at least going to start giving us some information that we all need, both from a big NASPA perspective and from the regional perspective. And a lot of that is how they want to engage with us, how they're behaving. Are they actually using their NASPA membership? And if we find out that we were totally wrong about our perceptions about our members, then that's going to help us take action on that and on that information that we get. Is there any questions that I can answer? I know that was a lot in a very short amount of time and we only have 4 minutes left on this call, but in the next 2 months, so in September and October, I just want to give you all a heads up that I will be reaching out to all of you in the regions to start asking for your help developing that content. And then that content that we sort of workshop together is going to go to our marketing communications team, and they're going to make sure that it is consistent with the NASPA brand and the NASPA voice. And then we'll test this out so you all can sort of see how this looks before we officially launch it. But I wanted to show you all sort of the first half of this project. And I think this is going to eventually be like a full year, right? So if Nathan Victoria joins in August, Nathan is going to get some type of engagement, touchy-feely, how's it going, emails, up until his membership is getting ready to expire in July, at least once every couple of weeks. But we're also not going to do it like once a week or once a month. We just want to make sure that we sort of complement it throughout the year. So that way they don't forget that they're a NASPA member. So by the time they get that boring transactional, your membership is going to expire in 90 days, hopefully they've built an affinity enough with NASPA and feel like they've connected with NASPA in some way that that prompts them to put a note on their calendar that says, oh, I have to make sure to renew my membership. And then we don't have those, then we have less and less rejoining members after having let their membership lapse for more than 60 days. And all we really have are new members and renewing members, which is like our ideal perfect association membership space. Any questions, comments, concerns? I will send this all out in nice noted form with a recording of this. But Nathan, Colleen, or Danny, is there anything that you all want to add from the Rev side? Well, thank you for those of you who are able to join our call this afternoon. I really appreciate you taking time of what is, I'm sure, a very, very busy August. I hope that you all, if you're enjoying any Labor Day festivities or time off, that you enjoy it and that you take what I'm sure is well-deserved and needed rest. And I will be in touch in the next couple of weeks about the content for these emails. So thank you so much for your time and all of your efforts so far. I really appreciate it and all of your input. Have a good afternoon.
Bye, y'all. Jordana,
Bye.
can I get you 2 quick questions?
Of course.
You want to stop the recording?
I'm trying to find my button.